You are listening to audiobooks at Great Dragon Audio Channel. Up next is Demon Emperor Episode Nam. Chapter Kong Nguyen Ho stood before the window of the detached villa, gazing into the distance, where a small bamboo grove was tightly encircled. The glow of flames within the grove illuminated the surroundings, making it possible for one to clearly see the events unfolding there, even in the dead of night. However, Nguyen Ho shifted his gaze and, at the same time, noticed the officials and tenant farmers of the estate converging from a distance. Soon, he also noticed the abnormality of that evil spirit. Nguyen Ho, this isn't a ghost. What is it? The celestial maiden in purple stood before the window, but she seemed unable to see the scenery outside. She could only hear Nguyen Ho's description. The power that separated the realms of yin and yang sometimes applied not only to the living but was no exception for ghosts and deities either. The celestial maiden in purple. I don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to be a type of nature spirit either. However, upon hearing Nguyen Ho's description of its appearance, body cloaked in bearskin, head adorned with a four-eyed golden mask, one hand wielding a shield, the other a halberd, the celestial maiden in purple seemed to recall something. Other legacies from high antiquity. When divine beings possessed some extremely ancient information, this was precisely what Nguyen Ho currently lacked. Bearskin, golden mask, this seems to be a Fang Shangxi? Before Nguyen Ho could even ask who or what this Fang Shangxi was, he had already sensed that something was amiss. That creature was exceedingly ferocious. He feared trouble was about to erupt below. Nguyen Ho immediately grabbed his longbow and his customary sword and rushed out the main door. His retinue of elite armored warriors instantly flanked him, descending together. By the time Nguyen Ho arrived, the situation had become extremely dire. The imposing figure wearing the four-eyed golden mask, one hand holding a shield, the other a halberd, was unstoppable. The large shield in his hand moved like a cloak, deflecting attacks with ease. It nimbly blocked assaults from all directions, while other, less powerful attacks were repelled by its bearskin hide and armor. With one hand, he swung the long halberd like a tempest, sending anyone who dared to charge him reeling in disarray. Meanwhile, Yuchi Chongwu, who had charged into the fray, looked to be mere moments away from being struck down. Yuchi Chongwu was a crucial figure in helping Nguyen Ho control the Imperial Guard. He could not be allowed to die now. Instantly, Nguyen Ho employed the soul-calling art, shouting aloud the name of the Fang Shangxi. Fang Shangxi. Simultaneously, a tiger's roar emanated from within Nguyen Ho's body, merging with the soul-calling art. Roar. As the shout rang out, everyone looked up. To them, the sound was like a dragon's roar. And Nguyen Ho, standing elevated, seemed like a dragon soaring through the air. A dragon's cry, a tiger's roar, ordinary people could hardly distinguish between them. What terrified them even more was that, following Nguyen Ho's mighty shout, everyone was momentarily frozen, unable to move. It was as if mortals beholding a fierce tiger or encountering a true dragon were so consumed by fear that their very sinews and bones seemed to vanish, ceasing to exist. Among them were Huang Wei and Li Hongdao. One stared wide-eyed. The other's body trembled uncontrollably. That was how others reacted. The Fang Shangxi, whose name had been called, felt it even more intensely. The three words, Fang Shangxi, felt like a great seal, impressed directly from on high, deeply engraving itself into his mind, pinning itself firmly within his body. It was also like a sharp blade cleaving through primordial chaos, causing a spark of spiritual insight to flash in his mind, making him recall many things. Fang Shang, he seemed to recall something. But by then, Nguyen Ho had already drawn his bow, nocked an arrow, and loosed it towards the Fang Shangxi. Nguyen Ho, clad in brocade robes, stood on the mountainside, surrounded by his armored warriors, as conspicuous as a crane among a flock of chickens. The stiff bow was drawn taut as a full moon, and one could perceive the immense power contained within it just by looking. Thwack! Nguyen Ho's arrow, without deviation, struck the opponent squarely on the head. Clatter! The four-eyed golden mask fell to the ground. The Fang Shangxi first collapsed to its knees, distantly gazing towards Nguyen Ho's position. Then, it toppled to the ground, motionless. At this moment, the crowd recovered from the effect of the shout, Fang Shangxi. They focused their gaze. The evil spirit, which moments before had seemed like a deity descended to earth, had fallen thus, felled by a single shout and an arrow from the Son of Heaven. This, is it dead? Killed by His Majesty with a single arrow. The might of Nguyen Ho's single arrow had stunned everyone present. Just moments ago, they had witnessed with their own eyes the unstoppable might of the Fang Shangxi. Each person had even been preparing to flee or take cover. At this moment, the officials, soldiers, servants, and tenant farmers of the Li family clan were trembling in fear, gazing at Nguyen Ho as if he were a celestial being. Even Yuqi Changwu stared wide-eyed. Quote, this, he had just been grappling directly with that creature. He knew how formidable it was, having nearly lost his life to it. Immediately thereafter, everyone knelt in unison, facing the Son of Heaven in brocade robes on the mountainside, and shouted loudly, Your Majesty is mighty. However, Nguyen Ho frowned. His arrow had not been intended to kill the opponent, but merely to save Yuqi Changwu. He hadn't expected his arrow to possess such devastating power. It wasn't just the others who were astonished, he himself was taken aback. Of course, that was only one aspect. The primary reason for Nguyen Ho's frown was that after felling the opponent, the tiger spirit within him showed no reaction whatsoever. Is it because this thing isn't a spectral entity, and therefore has no soul? Or perhaps, it isn't truly dead at all? Nevertheless, Yuqi Changwu, deeply understanding the principle of ensuring a kill, immediately advanced to inspect the corpse of the Fang Shangxi. But upon approaching to examine the remains on the ground, Yuqi Changwu's expression changed dramatically. Empty? After the four-eyed golden mask had been shot off by the arrow, there was nothing underneath it. This thing, it actually had no head. An edict from His Majesty. The hour is late. You are all to retire and rest for now. Any matters can be reported tomorrow. A eunuch, leading other eunuchs and imperial guards, approached the path on the left side of the estate and addressed Li Hongdao, Huang Wei, and the assembled officials. As before, Li Hongdao was the first to step forward, his demeanor even more deferential than previously. Li Hongdao, who had already been repeatedly suppressed by Nguyen Ho and partially subdued by a series of his maneuvers, now having witnessed the Son of Heaven's might in felling the Fang Shangxi with a single arrow tonight, dared not even look him directly in the eye. We thank Your Majesty. The night wind blew past. Huang Wei, who followed to receive the edict, had only just regained his composure. The cold sweat on his back had dried, leaving him feeling a slight chill. Huang Wei had never imagined things would conclude in such a manner. Tonight had truly been full of unpredictable turns. Initially, he had considered it a minor issue, preparing to seize this opportunity to escalate matters. After the Fang Shangxi appeared, he realized the problem had become serious. Then, when Yuqi Changwu nearly died at the creature's hands, he felt a mixture of alarm and perverse delight. And finally, the Son of Heaven felling the Fang Shangxi with a single arrow left Huang Wei utterly dumbfounded, his mind reeling. Although he had heard various accounts concerning the Son of Heaven, this was the first time Huang Wei had witnessed such a display with his own eyes. Personal martial prowess, even at a certain level, has limited influence. However, if the Son of Heaven possessed such martial might and prestige, it was a different matter entirely. It could grant stronger control and far greater influence. Huang Wei remained silent, but Chen Guang, standing behind him among the officials, spoke up, seizing the chance to voice his thoughts. Did you all see that just now? The surrounding officials, unsure what Chen Guang was referring to, looked around in confusion, uncertain of his meaning. At this, Chen Guang declared loudly, the Son of Heaven's draconic aura. Did none of you see it just now? A golden dragon was circling overhead. He bowed deeply towards the distant villa where the Son of Heaven was resting, then straightened and proclaimed, Without the Son of Heaven's draconic aura, how could such an evil spirit have been subdued? That dragon's cry echoed through the 9 heavens, purging evil from all directions. His Majesty truly possesses the bearing of a great revitalizing sovereign. As soon as these words were spoken, the officials began to murmur excitedly amongst themselves, all claiming they had indeed witnessed the Son of Heaven's draconic aura. Chapter Mo, the corpse of that Fang Shangxi, was brought into the courtyard of the detached villa. Yuqi Changwu, fearing that even in death, before its body stiffened, it would continue to cause trouble, had even bound it with iron chains. And at this moment, in the pavilion behind the flower garden, Nguyen Ho was conversing with the purple-robed celestial maiden, whose image was directly reflected from a mirror within an ethereal chamber. The content of their conversation was precisely about this Fang Shangxi. Nguyen Ho stood in the main hall, looking at the purple-robed celestial maiden by the windowsill, and asked, "Who is Fang Shangxi?" The windowsill was as round as the moon, and the celestial maiden's ethereal figure appeared even more aloof, cold, and noble. Fang Shangxi is not a person, but an official title from ancient times. They acted on behalf of the Son of Heaven to perform rituals exorcising evil spirits, and were responsible for dispelling plagues, demons, and the spirits of mountains and rivers. Nguyen Ho. So, are they a type of shaman then? The purple-robed celestial maiden, they are shamans. But not common folk shamans. They are a lineage inherited from high antiquity. A clan whose members, generation after generation, were appointed by the Son of Heaven. Their duty was precisely to exorcise evil spirits on behalf of the Son of Heaven. These renowned lineages from high antiquity possess certain abilities, much like the Jai Ren of the Jai Ren nation. Abilities that are both bizarre and difficult to imagine. Nguyen Ho asked again, "Why is this Fang Shangxi here? And also, why is he headless?" The purple-robed celestial maiden. "That is not something I would know." While Nguyen Ho was lost in thought, a eunuch from outside came in to announce that Yuqi Changwu had arrived. "Your Majesty, the corpse of Fang Shangxi has been brought." Nguyen Ho descended, with Yuqi Changwu following closely behind. Upon entering the courtyard, Yuqi Changwu immediately stepped forward and ordered his men to pull taut the chains wrapped around Fang Shangxi's corpse. Nguyen Ho looked at the corpse, even headless. It was considerably taller than an ordinary person. He meticulously observed this entity. If one were to call it a ghostly creature, it still possessed the characteristics of a living being. Furthermore, unlike his own father, it wasn't limited to a fleeting existence in the mortal realm. If it were called a living person, it possessed the strength of demons and gods, and could still wreak havoc even without a head. Nguyen Ho then recalled the words of the purple-robed celestial maiden, similar to the Jai Ren. But with the naked eye, he truly couldn't discern any secrets hidden within this being's wondrous corpse. Thus, Nguyen Ho issued an order to Yuqi Changwu. "Go to the bamboo forest and search. See if you can find its head." Yes. After a night of turmoil, Nguyen Ho also felt somewhat weary. For the remaining tasks, he only needed to issue commands. There was no need for him to handle them personally. So, he had his men remove Fang Shangxi's corpse and then retired to rest. In the forest, Yuqi Changwu led a group of men and ordered the servants of the estate to thoroughly search the bamboo forest. Both inside and out, the once tranquil and elegant forest was now completely ravaged. However, neither the estate owner, Li Hongdao, nor the servants and tenant farmers uttered a single word of complaint. Had they known earlier that such a terrifying, evil spirit was buried here, how could they have dared to remain? Now, thanks to His Majesty's imperial aura which had subdued this evil spirit, they naturally had to seize this opportunity to eradicate it completely, eliminating any future threat for good. Otherwise, if they waited for this evil spirit to wreak havoc again, who would be able to withstand it? However, despite so many people thoroughly searching the entire bamboo forest, they still couldn't find Fang Shangxi's skull. Couldn't find it? Yuqi Changwu stood before a large pit. Inside, a headless corpse, charred black, was buried. It was the round, pale-faced man from before. This must be the original burial place of Fang Shangxi. But Yuqi Changwu found it very strange. Could it be that this Fang Shangxi was headless from the very beginning? Either his head was never buried here in the first place, or it was taken by someone else. And this manner of decaptation immediately brought to mind the practice of taking heads for military merit on the battlefield, a custom that has existed since ancient times. But Yuqi Changwu recalled the might of that Fang Shangxi. It was truly difficult to imagine who could have slain him on a battlefield. Or perhaps, he had ultimately fallen under the siege of a vast army. Elsewhere, Nguyen Ho had just lain down and drifted into a dream. A tall, shadowy, and indistinct figure passed through the detached villa, heading step by step towards higher ground. The figure moved through curtained corridors, passing through groups of guards, servants, and eunuchs, yet no one could perceive it. As this figure walked, it spoke softly, "Son of Heaven, Son of Heaven, where is the Son of Heaven?" On the bed, Nguyen Ho opened his eyes. The purple-robed celestial maiden called out softly, "Your Majesty, something has come. I have blocked it outside the door, it cannot enter." Nguyen Ho looked around and discovered a dense, obscuring fog outside the window. He immediately knew this was not the mortal world. It was either the spirit mirror illusionary realm or some kind of illusion. Nguyen Ho stood up and peered out the paper-screened door. Through it, by the moonlight, he could see a tall figure kneeling outside. It was just that, even while kneeling, the figure appeared imposing and tall, like a stone mountain set before the doorway. Gazing at this figure, Nguyen Ho instantly had a vague realization of who was kneeling outside. It was, of course, that Fang Shangxi. Nevertheless, Nguyen Ho still opened his mouth to ask, "Who is it that kneels outside?" A voice came from outside. "I am Fang Shangxi. Having heard your Majesty is here, I have come specifically to pay my respects." Nguyen Ho found it truly strange to hear this Fang Shangxi speak and conduct himself like one of his own subjects. It was unknown to what dynasty this Fang Shangxi belonged, yet he still acknowledged Nguyen Ho as the Son of Heaven. However, since the other party had acknowledged him as such, Nguyen Ho naturally played along and continued the conversation. Nguyen Ho shouted sternly, "Why did you murder high official of my court and harm innocent people? Do you know your crime?" Fang Shangxi's voice was heavy. "I know my crime. However, before this, I was in a daze and had forgotten all past matters. It wasn't until your Majesty clarified my identity that I finally recalled who I am. As for the person whose head I took, it was because that individual spoke disrespectfully of the Son of Heaven. At that time, although I was in a haze and didn't clearly recall the situation, I could not contain the rage in my heart. Therefore, I took his head and have come specially to present it to your Majesty." Having said this, something dropped outside, rolled swiftly in a circle, and then came to a stop directly in front of the doorway. It appeared to be the head of that round, pale-faced man. Not only that, but Nguyen Ho also saw an unformed ghostly shadow hovering over the head, emitting bursts of miserable wails. It was incredibly mournful, seemingly begging for forgiveness, but one couldn't hear it clearly without listening intently. However, at this moment, neither Nguyen Ho nor anyone else paid heed to the small ghost wailing and begging for forgiveness. Nguyen Ho asked again, "Since it is so, I shall pardon you. In truth, it was I who disturbed you, so it cannot be said to be entirely your fault." However, Fang Shangxi then said, "It was not your Majesty who awakened me. Rather, I recently sensed that my skull was being controlled by someone, and that is why I awoke. That skull is flying towards this place." Nguyen Ho's gaze sharpened instantly. His first thought was whether someone was targeting him. Although it might seem overly suspicious, his high position naturally compelled him to be cautious. Just as he was about to inquire further, at that precise moment, a clear rooster's crow pierced the air. dispelling the fog outside and allowing a streak of golden morning light to stream in through the windowsill. And at the same time, the shadow outside was also enveloped. Cock-a-doodle-doo. Day had broken. Nguyen Ho's eyes snapped open, and he looked out the door again. The ghostly spirit of that Fang Shangxi had vanished without a trace. Only a Gory Severed head remained, its eyes wide and staring. Placed beside the door, Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Great Dragon Audio Channel Chapter High. I heard the deceased was a high-ranking official. I didn't expect even the Son of Heaven to come. And there were even evil spirits causing trouble. I heard the official who died was a good one. What a pity. Why have there been so many evil spirits causing trouble lately? They say the feng shui of the imperial mausoleum was disturbed, so these evil spirits escaped. That's why we must follow the rules left by our ancestors. Without rules, in the countryside and fields, a few rumors spread. Tenant farmers knew to be cautious and dared not speak recklessly. But the children spoke without any restraint. Who knows? In a while, they might even gather to sing children's folk rhymes. As for why the feng shui of the late emperor's mausoleum was disturbed, and what the so-called ancestral rules had to do with feng shui, these people didn't elaborate, but those in the know understood. When Nguyen Ho heard these rumors, he snorted coldly. Your Majesty, I will immediately send men to arrest these rumor mongers. Chu Ji County knelt on the ground, his eyes cold. Nguyen Ho glanced at him, then said, "What's the use of arresting these people? The mouths of the common folk and children. Can you silence them?" Chu Ji County swore resolutely. "Anyone who dares to speak ill of your Majesty, even if I have to use my own life to stop them, I will definitely stop them." Nguyen Ho shook his head. "Some matters can't be addressed superficially. You must grasp the root of the problem." Nguyen Ho descended, escorted by an entourage, and left the private estate. In the distance, the Son of Heaven's ceremonial procession was ready. The escorting troops were lined up, and civil and military officials waited at the front. Before departing, Nguyen Ho stood on the carriage frame, looking down at the officials performing their salutations below. First, he spoke about last night's events, which served as a summary. Quote, "The one who appeared last night was not an evil spirit, but an ancient Fang Shangxi, a loyal and upright minister recorded in history, who was buried here after his death, because someone disturbed him. He awakened. Last night, I discerned his true nature and called out his background. This Fang Shangxi finally recalled past events and thus retreated." The crowd buzzed with discussion. Some had a sudden realization, while others seemed to have guessed it beforehand. Unlike Nguyen Ho, who was unlettered, most of the civil and military officials here had read the classics and knew what a Fang Shangxi was. So it was a Fang Shangxi. Fang Shangxi was an official position from ancient times, existing since the pre-Qin era. I wonder which dynasty this Fang Shangxi is from. No wonder. The officials immediately changed their tune, no longer calling that Fang Shangxi an evil spirit, but vying to praise him. And last night's event became a legend praising the Son of Heaven. Also a testament to the mandate of heaven. Nguyen Ho saw that everyone accepted this explanation and was busy singing his praises. Then, he moved on to another matter. He had Chu Ji County step forward and open a box, which contained the skull of the round-faced, fair-skinned man. Nguyen Ho asked, "Last night, the Fang Shangxi appeared in my dream, begging my forgiveness for past offenses, and returned this skull. This morning, I heard that this man was also a loyal minister. What do you say we should do?" This time, Hoang Hui's faction became agitated, stepping forward one by one. Some sighed endlessly. Some had tears welling in their eyes. Some said he died shielding the Son of Heaven from disaster, so he should be granted a fine posthumous title and his official rank should be elevated. Some said his loyalty moved heaven and earth. Some said his reputation would be passed down through the ages. Nguyen Ho smiled, then asked them a question. If he was a loyal minister, why was he slain by the Fang Shangxi? Who can distinguish between treachery, evil, and demons? Everyone looked at each other. And for a long while, No one could answer, and while they were trying to come up with an excuse, Nguyen Ho had already decided the matter. Quote, "Last night, the Fangshang Shi appeared in my dream and said when returning this skull. He said that last night, this man uttered arrogant words insulting me, spoke wildly and disrespectfully. That Fangshang Shi, being a loyal and upright minister, was indignant and thus beheaded him." Nguyen Ho looked at the officials of Hoang Hui's faction, then asked, "I wonder if my beloved ministers heard these arrogant and disrespectful words. I would also like to hear if he was wrongly accused." As soon as these words were spoken, these people bowed their heads, not daring to look Nguyen Ho in the eye. Some timid ones even had their shoulders trembling slightly. Clearly, they had a guilty conscience. Not only had they heard it, but some of them had even said similar things last night. Nguyen Ho did not pursue the matter further. He looked towards Hoang Hoi. Hoang Hoi felt his scalp tingle, and even wanted to hide behind others like the rest. If this matter implicated him, he would be the one to bear the brunt. But he was, after all, the leader of this faction, and everyone knew the skull in the box belonged to his man. Others could avoid it, but he could only stand at the very front. Nguyen Ho asked Hoang Hoi, "Minister Hoang, how do you think this should be handled?" Hoang Hoi replied with a ferocious expression, "This kind of petty man who forsakes his ruler and father, arrogant and lawless, should have his bones ground to dust, and his 9 relations exterminated." After Hoang Hoi finished speaking, even Nguyen Ho was stunned for a moment. When it comes to true ruthlessness, one still had to look at these scholars. Once these words were spoken, the expressions of the others looking at Hoang Hoi also changed. As a faction leader, not only did he not dare to step forward at the critical moment, but he also sold out his subordinate and his 9 relations to protect himself. Although many had disliked the round-faced, fair-skinned man before, at this moment, many in the crowd immediately felt a sense of, "The rabbit dies. The fox grieves." It was just that these people's resentment was not directed at the Son of Heaven, but at Hoang Hoi standing at the front. Nguyen Ho shook his head after hearing this, then said, "Exterminating 9 relations is a bit too much." Nguyen Ho took the box and threw it into the remnants of last night's bonfire, which had not yet completely extinguished on one side, symbolizing that this matter was concluded. The fire crackled, and Nguyen Ho seemed to faintly hear a tragic cry from within. This round-faced, fair-skinned man was not important. Nguyen Ho had been targeting Hoang Hoi from the beginning. Or more precisely, the local powerful factions represented by Hoang Hoi, although he could have taken the opportunity to bring down Hoang Hoi just now. For example, some smug individuals who participated in last night's meeting, with a little maneuvering, could certainly be made to jump out and accuse Hoang Hoi. But killing Hoang Hoi wouldn't mean much. The Hoang family behind Hoang Hoi would not be fundamentally damaged. After all, they would just put another person forward. On the contrary, it would unite the local powerful factions in West City, and the Hoang family behind Hoang Hoi might even completely side against Nguyen Ho. The key was to use this matter to disintegrate the local powerful factions represented by Hoang Hoi. To prevent these people from uniting as one, yet not let them resent Nguyen Ho, and ultimately, this entire force could still be used by Nguyen Ho. However, this was not something that could be accomplished immediately. The work done here could only be considered the beginning. Upon departure, Nguyen Ho looked at the bamboo forest that had been burned to ashes. Such beautiful scenery ruined, all due to petty individuals causing trouble. The warning from the gods is indeed not wrong. It was unknown if it was an illusion. Hoang Hoi, standing before the officials, heard this sentence, especially when he heard the 2 words, petty individuals. He felt that the Son of Heaven was looking at him, and others were also looking at him. Another slow day's journey. When it was time to rest for the night, Nguyen Ho discovered that the tiger within his body had gone out for a trip and then returned. It didn't go to eat the Fangshang Shi, but to eat the soul of the round-faced, fair-skinned man. The tiger joyfully rubbed against Nguyen Ho's legs, then once again added a Tran Fach fragment to him. Tran Fach of Shu Bai calligraphy. Nguyen Ho examined this mass of light. his eyes flickering slightly. A calligraphy-type Tran Fatch. This was exactly what he needed. Because he was not good at writing with a brush. Nguyen Ho had recently been using the excuse of fatigue and laziness to refuse to approve memorials. Or he would simply draw a punctuation mark or a slash on them. Although he had secretly practiced a bit, this was not something that could be mastered in a short time. It was just that the Tran Fatch in Nguyen Ho's body was full. And no more could be stuffed in. However, Nguyen Ho had recently been searching for a method to replace Tran Fatch and Tran Hun, and had made some progress. Now, this Tran Fatch of Shu Bai calligraphy was even more what he needed. Nguyen Ho immediately followed the method, forcibly inserting this Tran Fatch into his consciousness. Enter. The mass of light struggled to squeeze in, and then another mass of light flew out from Nguyen Ho's head. Nguyen Ho had found a method to replace Tran Fatch. Rotating in sequence, Nguyen Ho finally replaced one of the two redundant Tran Fatch of proficient horsemanship and archery. At this moment, 7 Tran Fatch, including refined speech, art of physiognomy, unfailing archery, 100 battles saber technique, proficient horsemanship and archery, poison art, and Shu Bai calligraphy, were circulating in his consciousness. And above them, 2 Tran Hun, soul summoning and form supplementing by form, were flying around. Like the lamp, Nguyen Ho used the lamplight to unroll a long scroll, then dipped his brush into the inkstone and skillfully put pen to paper. It's a bit different. Nguyen Ho compared it with his predecessor's handwriting. Shu Bai calligraphy was a style of steel inscription that most people in West City practiced. And his predecessor had also learned this calligraphy. But at this moment, the characters he wrote were neither like those of the round-faced, fair-skinned man, nor like his predecessors, but seemed to be a combination of both. After imitating his predecessor's calligraphy style a few times, Nguyen Ho gradually regained the feel, at least able to write with 80 to 90% similarity. Nguyen Ho lifted his brush, his left hand holding the lamp tightly, and carefully examined it. It's similar. From now on, he too could display his calligraphy, showing off his elegance. Chapter Ba. In the dead of night, Nguyen Ho, while sleeping, dreamed again of that Phuong Tuong Ti. The figure of Phuong Tuong Ti hovered outside, still unable to enter, but her voice reached Nguyen Ho's ears. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. That skull drew a little closer. The night was deathly still. That voice from outside sounded eerie. But Nguyen Ho was not afraid. He was about to ask something more when he suddenly woke up. This time, he wasn't awakened by a rooster, but by a commotion outside. Do not go out. Do not move about recklessly. Have you forgotten the military order? Anyone who makes a rash move, execute them. Someone's terrified scream was quickly stifled. But the commotion outside didn't stop. More and more soldiers were getting up, and Nguyen Ho saw rows of brightly lit torches. Seeing this scene, Nguyen Ho momentarily thought someone was rebelling. Nguyen Ho had intended to go out and see, but he frowned, feeling he couldn't go out. It was pitch black outside. Going out might get him caught in the chaos, making the situation even worse. While unsure of what was happening, Nguyen Ho felt he must remain calm. At this moment, he instead ordered his men to light all the torches, showing that his location was still safe and sound. Of course, Nguyen Ho made this decision because he was confident, believing that even if a problem arose, the majority of the imperial guards he brought with him would be fine. Even if there was an issue, it would only be a small group causing trouble. Others seeing his place lit up would surely head this way and would also be reassured that the Son of Heaven was unharmed. Sure enough, the first person to rush over was Yuchi Chongwu. He announced his arrival and entered. Kneeling on the ground, Nguyen Ho sat calmly. What happened? Yuchi Chongwu said, just now. I heard someone shouting loudly in my ear. Get up quickly. Something is trying to harm your majesty. I woke up immediately and saw something flying in midair, staring at me. It was a skull flying in the sky, its black hair unbound, trying to wrap around my neck. I drew my saber and slashed at it. The thing then flew outside, screaming out there. A few soldiers saw it and were frightened. Disturbing your majesty. Please, Your Majesty, punish me, Nguyen Ho asked. Where's that thing now? Yuchi Chongwu. Still in the sky. Nguyen Ho went out to look and indeed saw a skull flying in the sky. But Nguyen Ho already knew the cause. That thing, with its disheveled hair, was flying erratically high above. At a glance, it was impossible to tell what kind of monstrous creature it was. Outside, the personal guards had formed a tight defensive formation. The moment that thing descended slightly, someone shot arrows into the sky, but none hit. Seeing this, Nguyen Ho ordered someone to bring him a bow. He aimed at the flying skull in the sky, drew the bowstring taut, and then with a whoosh, the arrow tore through the air. Swish! A few sharp-eyed archers saw it clearly and immediately shouted. It hit. Each one of them appeared incredibly excited. Even though Nguyen Ho had demonstrated this archery skill many times, each performance still made the soldiers' blood boil with enthusiasm. It was just that, even though it hit, it was almost as if it hadn't. This archery skill Nguyen Ho learned from that ghost general was indeed formidable. This flying skull in the sky had managed to dodge it. Yet it directly caught the arrow with its mouth. That skull bit the arrow, chewed it into 2 pieces, and then burst into arrogant laughter. Quote, "Hee hee hee ha ha. Ha 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 ha. Didn't hit. Didn't hit." This thing had originally intended to sneak in for a surprise attack. But now it no longer had the chance. Although it flew around ostentatiously in the sky, it could no longer inflict any damage. But Nguyen Ho still felt a bit lucky. Fortunately, I had that warning from Phuong Tuong Ti. Otherwise, if such a monstrous thing had truly launched a sneak attack in the night, it would have been very difficult to guard against. Even if Nguyen Ho himself was unharmed, there was no telling what chaos might have ensued. Nguyen Ho watched the skull flying in the sky, growing increasingly insolent. He immediately performed the soul summoning technique and then shot another arrow. Because he didn't know the opponent's name, Nguyen Ho's soul summoning cry only made it pause for a very short time. But that was enough. Taking advantage of that moment, Nguyen Ho shot an arrow, hitting the skull's eye. It let out a miserable shriek. The tiger spirit within Nguyen Ho's body also appeared, restlessly hovering beside him. But this thing, surprisingly, was not dead yet. It flickered in and out of sight in the sky, its long hair flying chaotically, seemingly about to fall, but it never did. Others also shot arrows after it, but they no longer hit it. Its single remaining eye looked at Nguyen Ho with extreme terror. It let out a sharp, piercing cry, shrieked, and then dragged the long arrow with it as it fled. Nguyen Ho paid it no mind and slowly lowered his bow. At this moment, an archer suddenly pointed into the distance. "Look over there." Everyone looked in that direction. Immediately, they saw a large flock of skulls flying in the sky, moving en masse in one direction. The injured skull staggered higher, merging into that flock, usually flying in formation in the sky. Only autumn geese did that. That sight was as beautiful as a poem or a painting. But when what was flying in the sky was a series of skulls trailing long hair, the feeling was indescribably eerie, making one's scalp tingle. Among the human heads, there was an old man, bald on one side. There was a seductively charming woman. There was a ferocious, murderous man, and there were heads from whose necks dripped an unknown substance, be it mucus or blood, looking utterly disgusting. The skull of that Phuong Tuong Ti was probably among them, but Nguyen Ho couldn't distinguish which one it was. Seeing this scene, everyone present was utterly horrified. So many? What are all these things? Where are they going? Nguyen Ho watched the flock of skulls fly across the sky like autumn geese. It was very clear they were heading to another place, not towards him. Their main target isn't me. At least this time, he wasn't their primary target. However, this world has never been isolated. Events with events, things with things, they have always been interconnected, like a spiderweb with countless tangled threads. No matter what these people or these things intended to do, as the son of heaven of the western city land, Nguyen Ho would undoubtedly be drawn into it. What on earth are these monstrous things? With only a skull left, they can still fly in the sky? Nguyen Ho initially thought that ghostly creatures were all illusory. capable only of using some deceitful tricks to indirectly affect the mortal world. But, seeing Phuong Tuong Ti, and then this flying skull in the sky, all of it told Nguyen Ho that this world was perhaps not so simple. Several hundred li away, a certain village stockade. The stockade was filled with man-people. Many of these Liao people had very strange characteristics. That is, around their necks, they wore ring after ring of gold, making their necks look unnaturally long. Very frightening. At this moment, a Na altar was being erected in the stockade. On the table, countless jars were densely arranged. Above the Na altar, a Wu Shi, with numerous rings around his neck, was performing a ritual. Suddenly, a paper effigy on the Na altar began to move, opening its mouth to speak. The phantom and the paper effigy's form gradually merged, and then that face became incredibly vivid. Like a living thing. Looking at its appearance, it was actually Prince Ma. Having lost the netherworld ghost domain, Prince Ma had become a lonely, wandering ghost, a rogue spirit drifting in the darkness. If things continued like this, it wouldn't be long before he couldn't even properly be a ghost. As soon as Prince Ma opened his mouth, he still spoke in that ghostly voice that sounded like he had eaten mud. "Help me rescue my wife, and I will surely reward you handsomely." Nguyen Ho showed no martial virtue, using his grand army along with divine and demonic forces to annihilate these strange shamanistic ghosts and deities, purging these sneaky, malevolent entities. But in this world, who doesn't have some connections? Prince Ma also came to seek help. It's just that when you are powerful and seek help, versus when you are down and out and seek help, the circumstances are naturally different. The Wu Shi before the Na altar understood the ghost's words and immediately burst into loud laughter, unabashedly mocking him. "What wife of yours? By now, she's probably become someone else's lady by. Don't even dream about it anymore." Hearing this, Prince Ma was so angry his eyelids felt like they would tear. The third eye on his forehead turned so red it was almost grayish-black, looking as if it had grown moldy. Above the Na altar, the horse-faced paper effigy let out a series of ghostly wails. It was unclear what it was saying, but it was evident that it was utterly humiliated. The Wu Shi on the Na altar saw Prince Ma fly into a rage and finally stopped provoking him. "Don't be embarrassed anymore." This Wu Shi stood up and picked up the ritual implement beside him. Quote, "Watch me act on your behalf, to avenge you and wash away your shame. Seize his kingdom, and bring your wife back." Without this worldly power, he's merely a mortal. At that time, wouldn't he be at your mercy? Prince Ma saw through it. You were already prepared to deal with him, already intending to make a move. Nguyen Ho was not only Prince Ma's enemy. Nguyen Ho's recent actions had provoked quite a few people and forces. To Nguyen Ho, it was merely reclaiming what rightfully belonged to him. But to these people, what was yours? Everything in this land of the western city belonged to them. But this Wu Shi did not admit it. Doing something willingly versus someone else begging you to do it, the price was completely different. The Wu Shi. This is, after all, the Son of Heaven. Although I dislike him, there's no need for me to make trouble for him. If you hadn't come begging, why would I do this? Prince Ma. What Son of Heaven? The great Shang dynasty perished long ago. The Wu Shi. He is still the Son of Heaven. Prince Ma gritted his teeth and said, "I want him dead." The Wu Shi laughed heartily. Since Prince Ma has spoken, I naturally cannot let him live. But having said this, he changed his tune. However, this matter cannot be accomplished by me alone. It needs further careful discussion. It requires. Prince Ma was very clear. What do you want? The Wu Zai's voice suddenly deepened. I want your Lua Quan. Prince Ma's expression changed. This thing could be said to be Prince Ma's greatest trump card. His day and night desire to rescue his lady Bai Gutchen was not necessarily out of deep love. It was because of this thing, which in the future might be the crucial trump card for him to turn the tables. At this moment, this Wu Shi with the gold-ringed neck wasn't just demanding an exorbitant price, he was trying to dig up his roots. To take his life. Prince Ma shouted angrily. Impossible. The Wu Zai's eyes turned cold. Truly cannot give it? Prince Ma glanced to his left and right, suddenly understanding something. If he refused, he feared he wouldn't be able to leave this place. At this stage, he had no qualifications to bargain. Prince Ma's strange expression changed repeatedly, finally seeming to accept his fate. He said, "All right, Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Tai Great Dragon Audio Channel Chapter Bon." Meanwhile, in another place, a swarm of skulls with disheveled hair soared through the sky. Hovering over the wilderness, they rose and fell, darting about erratically like a swarm of mosquitoes, apparently searching for something. "Have you found it yet? Is it here? Could this be the place?" The leading skull, its eyes wide like bronze bells, continuously asked. "Nothing. Not here. Nothing here." The skulls darting around them replied incessantly, their voices echoing one after another. Just then, the flying skull with the wide, bell-like eyes lost its patience and bellowed, all right, let's go find something else." They seemed to have received some information, for they immediately flew hastily from that spot to another. Though these flying skulls weren't particularly fast, they were indeed flying, unconcerned with the terrain below, able to hover freely in the sky. Before long, they arrived at a new location. The terrain below resembled a blooming lotus flower, with a constructed road extending from afar, flanked by cypress trees. At the end of the road was a 5-colored earthen mound. The ground was covered with square stone slabs, and there were large stone beasts. "Found it. This is the place. This is the place." As these skulls drew near, the stone beasts seemed to come alive, shadows detaching from them, roaring towards the sky. "They're tomb guardian beasts." "Tomb guardian beasts? Just a bunch of trash. Where's the guardian spirit? Where's the tutelary deity?" "What deity? The Nguyen family lost the mandate of heaven long ago." He ha ha. "That's just perfect. Just in time." They charged forward, pouncing on the tomb guardian beasts, gnawing at them wildly. After a round of roars, the surroundings fell silent of beastly cries, leaving only the eerie, gruesome sounds of chewing and the clattering of teeth. When everything settled, looking into the distance, a streak of white light had appeared at the edge of the horizon. Dawn is breaking. These skulls, one after another, burrowed beneath the 5-colored earthen mound. The Lotus Pagoda was the final destination of this journey. The large entourage traveled slowly for another day, finally arriving at their destination. The ceremonial guard, court officials, and imperial guards surrounded the Son of Heaven at the center. Who was Nguyen Ho? Gazing into the distance, the first thing that caught his attention was not the pagoda at the foot of the mountain, but the pavilion behind it. The pavilion was built against the mountain, supported by stone pillars below that resembled colossal, sky-shielding trees. The ancient pavilion stood majestically on the cliffside, like a celestial palace in a fairyland. Nguyen Ho stepped down from his jade carriage. The stone steps leading to the main gate of the pagoda were carved with lotus patterns, symbolizing a lotus blooming with every step. Passing through the pagoda gate, murals adorned the left and right walls. Upon entering, statues of the 8 great Vajras greeted him. Ascending the stairs, one could see the Buddha statue. Inside the main hall, one could only see the lower half of the Buddha statue. Only upon reaching the top of the stairs could the entire statue be seen. The Buddha statue resided in the hall, tall and imposing, its compassionate gaze looking down, seemingly pitying all living beings. And the visitor stood below, appearing incredibly small. Nguyen Ho merely glanced at it before turning to leave. "Let's go see the back." Nguyen Ho proceeded to the pavilion that had first caught his eye. Preparing to rest there, the pavilion was ancient, its windows covered with thin silk. Gazing through the silk window screens, the view from inside out was hazy and ethereal, while looking from outside in, it was serene and inscrutable. Nguyen Ho went inside. As dusk settled, he looked towards the imperial mausoleum of the late emperor. Not far away. If there truly is something in this imperial mausoleum, what should I do next? Nguyen Ho was worried that there might be something in the imperial mausoleum, something that could expose his identity, revealing he was not the original Nguyen Ho. But this matter had to be resolved, regardless of whether anyone intended to harm him. More importantly, resolving it outside the capital was far better than doing so within the city. At the very least, in this imperial burial area, no matter what happened, he held enough power in his hands to turn the tide. Clang! The sun set in the west, and a bright moon hung in the sky. After nightfall, the that mirror placed on the table automatically emitted a faint light. And the deity within the mirror also passed through the spirit illusion realm into the mortal world. The deity from the mirror on duty today was someone with a face familiar to Nguyen Ho. Bakko? A flickering oil lamp stood before the cliff wall. Behind the window curtain, a figure slowly bowed. This servant has come to attend to your majesty. Nguyen Ho. Are you on duty today? Bok Company. Heavenly Maiden Ju Hong allowed this servant to come. She addressed herself as this servant with every other word. Nguyen Ho didn't know what methods Heavenly Maiden Ju Hong had used to tame this deity to such an extent of obedience. Perhaps the strict hierarchy within the divine path was inherently like this. Nguyen Ho appraised this deity. Her figure was tall, slender, and graceful, full and smooth like fine jade. She still wore the same straight, white hanfu, only today a red silk sash was tied around her waist, perfectly dividing her body's proportions. He was clearly seeing her beautiful form directly, and could directly perceive her beauty. Yet, at this moment, Nguyen Ho wondered what it would look like viewed through the silk window screen. In an instant, an image appeared before Nguyen Ho's eyes. The dim lamplight, filtering through those graceful curves, would cast a beautiful silhouette onto the thin, hazy silk screen, like a lantern on the night of the Yuan Shao festival. He blinked. The image returned to what was before him. The red silk sash on the white hanfu was too striking, drawing one's gaze inevitably towards it. The deity Bok County noticed Nguyen Ho staring at her waist. Your Majesty. Why are you looking at this servant like that? Nguyen Ho smoothly replied, it just so happens. I have something to ask you. Nguyen Ho asked her if there was a type of monster with a flying skull in this area. She said, the land of Tai Tan has never had such a creature. If there is one, it must have come from outside. Or perhaps the time was too ancient, and this creature had disappeared from the mortal world for a very long time. So long that even she was unaware of it. Nguyen Ho thought to himself, from outside? In a flash, Nguyen Ho thought of Bui Nguyen Kiu. Recently, a large number of people had poured into the land of Tai Tan. Brought by him, Nguyen Ho asked again, does Heavenly Maiden Ju Hong have any message for you to convey to us? Today was not supposed to be her shift. Yet Heavenly Maiden Ju Hong had arranged for her to come. She must have something to tell him. She replied, Heavenly Maiden Ju Hong said that if any incident occurs at the late Emperor's mausoleum tomorrow, she will intervene to assist. She asks your Majesty to rest assured. Bok County didn't understand the meaning behind the words, but Nguyen Ho did. Therefore, he looked up. The other party was telling Nguyen Ho that if, during the rites at the late Emperor's mausoleum, any spirit or deity of the Nguyen clan saw through his identity, she would take action. This also meant she had realized that Nguyen Ho was not the Nguyen Ho of before. But after thinking this through, Nguyen Ho's tightly furrowed brows slowly relaxed. She had indeed seen through him. But she still chose Nguyen Ho. Not the son of heaven Nguyen Ho. Not the one who carried the imperial bloodline of the great Shang dynasty for hundreds of years. But just him, Nguyen Ho. Nguyen Ho nodded again. Chapter Namdan was approaching. The mountains were shrouded in a light gray mist. And along both sides of the spirit path, pines and cypresses were planted. Nguyen Ho leaned on the jade carriage, wearing a tamamo crown with 12 tassels. A ritual official holding a golden rod led the way in front, while Zanjia guards holding halberds stood in 2 rows on either side. Your Majesty, the black wine is ready. The Grand Master of Sacrificial Worship, carrying a lacquer wine cup inlaid with mother of pearl, stepped forward. Inside a black bronze ewer, the dark wine swirled. Nguyen Ho nodded. At the end of the spirit path, before the mausoleum mound built with 5-color earth, the heads of 3 sacrificial animals were displayed, and pine wood was burning. The air was filled with the scent of incense smoke, mingled with the blue smoke from the burning pine resin. The minister of ceremonies unrolled a bamboo slip and read from the rites of Jo. For the grand sacrifice to heaven and earth, use ceremonial wine in a hu-yi goblet. Hundreds of officials in red silk robes prostrated themselves on the ground. Nguyen Ho raised the wine ewer 3 times in offering. The first cup was sprinkled before the 5-color earth mound. The second was poured onto the base of the bronze tripod. And the final cup was poured into the sizzling fire. Long live, 10,000 times 10,000 years. Amidst the officials' resounding shouts of, long live, Nguyen Ho looked at the mausoleum mound, but saw no movement whatsoever. It's not appearing? If this continued, after this grand ceremony, it would mean he was truly the son of heaven of Dai Sheng. Having received the mandate of heaven of the Dai Sheng dynasty, even if the late emperor didn't appear to call him an impostor, that he wasn't real, it would now be a fact. Nguyen Ho let out a soft sigh of relief. A sense of joy welled up within him. He was even prepared to make the Dai Sheng dynasty great once more. Suddenly, the tiger spirit within his body stirred strangely. Nguyen Ho glanced to both sides but detected nothing unusual. However, his vigilance was raised to its highest level. The entire sacrificial ceremony lasted for a full day. But Nguyen Ho's mind was not on the ceremony. Instead, he was observing his surroundings. The tiger spirit stirred unusually several times. He was certain something was nearby, but he couldn't find it. Later, he prepared for the worst-case scenario. That the late emperor in the imperial mausoleum would appear in the form of a ghost or demon. He had even ordered Chu Jiako to make thorough preparations. But that thing still hadn't appeared. Why isn't it out yet? Waiting for nightfall? Nguyen Ho felt increasingly uneasy. In the meantime, he made a few more arrangements. Not only to guard against incidents within the imperial mausoleum but also against incidents elsewhere. Sure enough, when night fell, there was a commotion. Nguyen Ho and the civil and military officials were preparing to leave. Suddenly, the flames on the surrounding bronze vessels, which had already been extinguished, flared up again, one by one. Above the imperial mausoleum, a figure appeared, dragging a long imperial robe, down, from the mound of 5-color earth. It was just that in Nguyen Ho's eyes, the figure's appearance, rather than walking, seemed more like it was drifting. And beneath the long robe, no feet or shoes were visible. As it moved, it called out, "My son, Nguyen Ho, Nguyen Ho, where is my son, Nguyen Ho?" The entity passed through the high platform, floating down the stairs, drawing closer, allowing everyone to see its form clearly. The ministers below, who had been astounded and somewhat bewildered, but when they saw the figure's appearance, they all exclaimed in shock, then prostrated themselves. "It's the late emperor. The late emperor has manifested. Greetings to the late emperor." And that thing drifted unsteadily downwards. When it saw Nguyen Ho, also dressed in imperial robes, it suddenly screamed, "You are not my son Nguyen Ho. Who are you?" His eyes widened as if they would tear. Seemingly furious, "What demon dares to impersonate my son?" he shouted, his voice loud as a bell, clearly audible to everyone present. In an instant, many civil and military officials cast strange glances at Nguyen Ho. Nguyen Ho didn't care what this entity was, whether it was the real late emperor or a fake one, at this moment. He ignored the gazes behind him. He immediately prepared to draw the Son of Heaven's sword and make the opponent spurt blood 5 paces. But just as Nguyen Ho was about to act, his body couldn't move. "What's happening?" Nguyen Ho looked down, focusing on his body. It wasn't that his will couldn't move, but that this body, inherited from Nguyen Ho, couldn't move. Nguyen Ho looked up, once again staring at that ghostly late emperor, and noticed a mocking, malevolent glint in the other's eyes. This demonic thing had a blood connection to his body. Nguyen Ho instantly understood. Someone is using this, with bloodline as a medium, to cast a suppression spell on me. In a flash, Nguyen Ho seemed to see a towering ritual platform. On the altar table, a paper effigy dressed as the Son of Heaven was being wrapped. Coil after coil, with hair by a pair of withered hands, What a formidable sorcery! To be able to affect someone from such a distance. Nguyen Ho had heard the celestial maiden Miao Shang speak of the different realms of sorcery. The most common sorcery used direct contact mediums, such as sound, light, images, or sense, to affect a person, but at a higher level. Some Wu Shi could borrow items most directly connected to a person and, even from hundreds of miles away, make the sorcery affect the target. However, Nguyen Ho was no longer that rootless son of heaven, abandoned by heaven and despised by spirits. He also had a guardian spirit. The Xing Wu sachet Nguyen Ho always carried on his person suddenly emitted a strange fragrance. Nguyen Ho then heard someone whisper close to his ear, "Your Majesty, how can mere sorcery bind the son of the blue sky?" In an instant, Nguyen Ho felt his body could move again. Then, he swung his sword towards the figure in front. But the entity floated and dodged. It seemed weightless, and with a light turn, it was already several jong away. The ghostly soul seemed even more enraged, its eyes glaring, its disheveled hair also standing on end, angrily shouting at those below, "Unfilial son, you would actually kill your father." Before Nguyen Ho could mock the stupidity of this ghostly soul, it had just called Nguyen Ho a demonic impostor. And in a blink, it denied its own words, but at this moment, the guardian spirit on Nguyen Ho's person had acted. Nguyen Ho sensed something and turned his head. He saw strips of silk, thin as cicada wings, flew from behind him, dancing in the air. A heart-stirringly beautiful face drew close to him, raising a hand to blow gently before her red lips. "Who?" A fragrant breeze blew past, and a strong wind, making it hard to open one's eyes, rose around Nguyen Ho. That strong wind blew towards the ghostly soul, causing the imperial robe on the ghostly soul to be blown off. This time, the officials who were kneeling on the ground, their faces pale, uttered cries of terror. "Ah, only a head? Isn't this the thing from the other day?" Before everyone's eyes, all finally saw clearly the appearance of that late emperor. It turned out that beneath the robe of that skull, there was nothing. It was empty. The flying skull, its clothes blown off, revealing its true form, was also stunned for a moment, then let out demonic wails. It seemed to be cursing someone loudly. However, at this time, the contingency plans Nguyen Ho had prepared to deal with unexpected incidents were also deployed. Whoosh 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 whoosh. First, volleys of arrows, treated with medicine, shot towards the skull, forcing it to dodge frantically left and right, finally only able to fly higher. Then, teams of soldiers rushed in, surrounding the entire area, both inside and out. Right at this moment, as the flying skull impersonating the late emperor flew away, other flying skulls hidden in the imperial mausoleum also erupted into chaos. Then, like a disturbed beehive, they rushed out, flying towards the sky. Nguyen Ho had long been prepared since encountering this type of flying skull. And at this moment, he immediately deployed his measures. A team of soldiers carrying fishing nets rushed forward, casting their nets into the air. "Cast!" the captain shouted, and the soldiers immediately took action. This time, a swarm was immediately caught in the nets. Everyone quickly worked together, pulling the flying skulls down from the sky. The remaining ones shrieked and scattered in all directions. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Tai Great Dragon Audio Channel Chapter Sao before the Divine Tao. Chu Ji County stepped forward and knelt before Nguyen Ho. In the distance, a group of soldiers surrounded and restrained the flying skull, which was struggling relentlessly. "Your Majesty, this is the evil entity that disturbed the imperial mausoleum. By your command, I have now apprehended it." Nguyen Ho had initially deployed these men here not primarily to deal with evil entities, but rather to handle those civil and military officials. As luck would have it, they had actually captured the flying skull that had previously flaunted its power before him. Nguyen Ho turned his head again, looking towards the officials behind him, and asked, "A moment ago, didn't you all bow your heads and kowtow upon seeing this thing? Why are you not kowtowing now?" The assembly of officials, who had just knelt and kowtowed, were now extremely ashamed. Some lowered their heads, not daring to look, while others were obsequious and dared not answer. But Nguyen Ho just stared at them, seemingly determined to get an answer. Previously, not only had they hastily kowtowed upon seeing this thing, but after the spirit of the late emperor manifested and spoke those words, every one of them had looked at Nguyen Ho with meaningful gazes. Quickly, someone understood. I was incomparably foolish, mesmerized by these malevolent entities, and offended the late emperor. My crime deserves 10,000 deaths. May your majesty forgive my transgression. May your majesty forgive our transgressions. Everyone claimed that the late emperor who had just appeared was an impersonation by evil demons and malevolent entities. If the late emperor's spirit was false, then its words were naturally false too. Merely vile slander aimed at discrediting the Son of Heaven. Nguyen Ho didn't know for sure whether that flying head was the real late emperor or a fake one. Or perhaps, there truly was the spirit of the late emperor resting in peace beneath the imperial mausoleum. And as a result, these people, in their desire to control him, to slander Nguyen Ho, had refined it into a flying skull. But regardless of whether it was real or fake, it had now become fake. And Nguyen Ho, who had been deemed false, thereby became completely real. Thinking this, Nguyen Ho couldn't help but curl his lips into a smile. To prevent anyone from seeing his delight, he drew his sword and, with a single thrust, pierced the skull surrounded in the distance. His eyes were cold, brimming with murderous intent. The skull, completely pierced, let out a wretched scream and then fell silent. The sword pierced through the skull and embedded itself in the ground, due to the immense force. The blade still vibrated with a hum. Looking closely, this skull seemed familiar. It had one blind eye. It was the same flying skull that had previously laughed and shrieked boisterously before Nguyen Ho, only to be struck by one of Nguyen Ho's arrows. It seemed then, although these things could fly, they also had many weaknesses. They were not invulnerable to all methods. After killing one flying skull, Nguyen Ho spoke to his ministers and everyone present. I will surely eradicate these malevolent demons and find the masterminds behind this chaos. Before everyone, Nguyen Ho vowed a reconcilable enmity against the evil demons and rebellious culprits who had disturbed the late emperor's mausoleum. At the same time, within Nguyen Ho's body, a tiger's roar erupted, inaudible to others. Roar, the tiger god, which had previously only warned Nguyen Ho when he faced danger without taking any action, now made its move. It lunged towards the darkness, devouring the malevolent spirit's essence. When the tiger returned, it brought with it a trans soul, something Nguyen Ho desperately needed yet found incredibly difficult to obtain. Compared to trans essences, trans souls were much harder to acquire. But after understanding it, Nguyen Ho discovered this was a trans soul he fundamentally couldn't use. Nguyen Ho couldn't possibly pull his own head off like uprooting a turnip and transform into one of those grotesque creatures with a severed head trans soul. However, this massive light also allowed Nguyen Ho to see some strange images. Nguyen Ho saw some ancient barbarian tribesmen wearing golden neck rings, their necks looking somewhat terrifying. He also saw Vu Hitch shamans muttering incantations and dancing on high altars. Lotus Temple. Although today's events had come to a conclusion, for Nguyen Ho, it was like unraveling just one thread in a tangled skein of 1,000 clues. Nguyen Ho returned to the pavilion within the temple, his eyes filled with murderous intent. Seething with rage, he had just consecutively reprimanded numerous ministers, even stripping some of their official positions on the spot, demoting them by 3 ranks or straight to the bottom. The reasons were perfectly legitimate. Offending the late emperor, showing disrespect before the monarch, disrupting the sacrificial ceremony. In reality, it was to once again suppress and divide the officials, while simultaneously promoting those he wished to employ. But the vast majority, naturally, did not understand Nguyen Ho's true intentions. They only knew the Son of Heaven was furious. So everyone was cautious and wary, afraid of inviting disaster upon themselves. Thump. Nguyen Ho pushed open the door and entered. All his followers stopped, and those inside all prostrated themselves on the ground. Nguyen Ho, all of you, Withdraw. No one replied, but everyone quickly retreated, leaving only the guards stationed at the door. Light flashed within the mirror. From the bronze mirror, concentric halos spread out, revealing the image of a divine grotto. An otherworldly immortal realm, a divine being, with a noble and graceful appearance but somewhat scantily clad, escorted by 2 palace maidens, descended from the immortal grotto in the mirror into the mortal world. Appearing before Nguyen Ho, celestial maiden Miaoshang, "Is your majesty well?" Nguyen Ho, "For today's events, I must thank you for your assistance." Nguyen Ho recalled the recent scene. Today's outcome was thanks to celestial maiden Miaoshang. Otherwise, if the scene of the late emperor's spirit manifesting to admonish the Son of Heaven had successfully played out before the civil and military officials, and then it had retreated unscathed, Nguyen Ho would have truly been in great trouble. But now, celestial maiden Miaoshang's actions had exposed that late emperor's spirit as an illusion conjured by a malevolent entity, and the opponent's plan had completely collapsed. Nguyen Ho asked celestial maiden Miaoshang, "What exactly is this thing?" Celestial maiden Miaoshang said, "Does your majesty know how the divine Tao, especially the ancient gods, came into being?" Nguyen Ho, "I implore the celestial maiden to enlighten me." Celestial maiden Miaoshang, "Sorcery lies in using an intermediary object to influence others, while the divine Tao lies in imitation and belief." Nguyen Ho was somewhat confused. Imitation? Belief? Imitate what? Believe in what? Celestial maiden Miaoshang said, "Imitate what exists in mythology. Believe in what exists in mythology." She gave the simplest example. For instance, ghosts in the netherworld are the most primitive and ancient form of the divine Tao. In ancient times, the words ghost and God were not distinct. Ghosts were gods, and gods were ghosts. For example, what was called a mountain ghost in ancient times actually referred to a mountain god. Nguyen Ho still didn't quite understand. So what are ghosts imitating or believing in? Celestial maiden Miaoshang said, "Humans believe they will not die. If this belief is strong enough, then after death, that person will transform into a ghost." Nguyen Ho was somewhat pensive. Although celestial maiden Miaoshang hadn't told him what the power of gods was, she had told him something even closer to its essence. Celestial maiden Miaoshang, "But the belief and imitation of a single person have limited power. When the collective will of 10,000 people is gathered, combined with the sacrificial rites of the Vu Hij, deities are born." However, in ancient times, the divine Tao and the Vu Tao, shamanic Tao, had myriad connections, difficult to clearly separate, even forming a unified system. Sometimes, these two types of power were mixed, or even used together. Within the belief of tens of thousands, deities are thus conceived and born. Nguyen Ho stepped forward, even touching celestial maiden Miaoshang's sash. He asked, "But these flying skulls in the sky are not simply ghosts or gods, they are living things, capable of physically interacting with objects in the mortal world." Celestial maiden Miaoshang, "After the most primitive gods of ancient times were born from ignorance, the ancient people and the Vu Hij did one more thing." Nguyen Ho asked, "What thing?" Celestial maiden Miaoshang, "Live human sacrifice." Celestial maiden Miaoshang told Nguyen Ho that live human sacrifices in ancient times involved hundreds, even thousands of people each time. And this practice continued for hundreds, even thousands of years. When this kind of bloody sacrificial ritual reached a certain level, it would cause unimaginable transformations in people or certain things. Thus, the Vu Hij who presided over the sacrifices, who were also the leaders of tribes and nations, would also receive certain powers from myths and legends. This kind of power would be hidden in their bloodlines, and they called themselves descendants of ancient gods. These people, relying on this power, left behind all sorts of unbelievable legends. Celestial maiden Miaoshang, however, with the end of the primitive tribal era of the ancient savage desolation, these ancient existences also gradually went into seclusion one by one. In an instant, Nguyen Ho thought of the Nguyen family's Jai Ren power. Wasn't this a power inherited from that ancient savage desolation era? It had merely gone into seclusion, not disappeared. Celestial Maiden Miaoshang, Your Majesty need not worry. Even ancient divine beings, possessing supernatural powers, could not withstand heavenly armies and myriad cavalries. Their flesh and blood bodies still could not endure blades, spears, swords, and halberds. Furthermore, there were all sorts of limitations and drawbacks, and the price to pay was too great. Otherwise, why would they have retreated into seclusion? Nguyen Ho nodded slightly. So these flying skulls are actually relics left behind by some ancient tribe that worshipped a certain ancient deity. Correct? Celestial Maiden Miaoshang. That should be the case. Chapter Bay. Late at night, Nguyen Ho sat at his desk, flipping through ancient texts. One hand held a brush, occasionally writing something down. His handwriting was also becoming more and more refined. Ancient divine beings, descendants and bloodline of the ancient divine emperor. Having heard Du Hong Thien Nu explain the possible origins of that flying skull, it still didn't solve the immediate problem. There was no way to find the person behind the sorcery controlling this flying skull. If he couldn't eliminate him, or rather, completely eradicate those flying skulls, he feared he wouldn't have any peace. Especially since one of those skulls was the head of the father of Nguyen Ho's current body. This direct bloodline connection was tantamount to the enemy holding one of his vital weak spots. Nguyen Ho hadn't forgotten. Just moments ago, the enemy had used it as a medium, employing oppressive sorcery to suppress him to the point where he could barely move. Vu Hitch and that ancient chieftain used living people as sacrifices, obtaining some unimaginable divine powers. Nguyen Ho recalled the human sacrifices conducted by the ghost master of the Hell Path in the palace long ago. Now, it seemed it wasn't so simple. He then thought to himself, were those corporeal souls and ethereal souls considered a type of human sacrifice? Could they also create some special existences? Even some of the mystical aspects about himself, were they manifestations of this ancient custom? As he pondered, Nguyen Ho felt a bit tired. He yawned, then slumped onto the table and fell asleep. He hadn't completely sunk into his dreams yet. Dimly, he sensed a familiar, fragrant figure approaching from behind, draping a coat over him. However, he hadn't slept for long before someone came to the door, disturbing him. The ghost of Fangshang Shi appeared outside the door once more, still kneeling silently on the ground as before. Your Majesty. Nguyen Ho was awakened by Du Hong Thien Nu. Looking outside, he recognized the figure at a glance. Nguyen Ho looked towards Du Hong Thien Nu, who signaled that it was all right. Nguyen Ho, come in. As he spoke, the door opened by itself, and a tall, imposing but headless figure walked in. Fangshang Shi had come to pay respects to Nguyen Ho twice, but this was the first time he had entered. Fangshang Shi knelt, unable to kowtow. He still made the gesture of kowtowing. However, this posture displayed the horrifying wound at his neck before Nguyen Ho. An incredibly chilling sight. Nguyen Ho, I've heard that the ancient Fangshang Shi possessed the divine ability to exorcise ghosts. Do you know it as well? Fangshang Shi, Your Majesty. I am no longer a true Fangshang Shi. If I were alive, I could certainly drive away all evil spirits and demons for Your Majesty. But now, I am a ghost myself. Nguyen Ho asked him, how did your head fall into someone else's hands? Fangshang Shi. That person searches everywhere for those possessing ancient bloodlines, seizing their bloodlines to create the fallen headfolk. Fangshang Shi spoke, his voice filled with undying hatred. From Fangshang Shi, Nguyen Ho also learned why the enemy sought specific corpses to steal their heads. It turned out they were after the bloodlines within these individuals. Now, Fangshang Shi not only lacked a head but had also become a wandering, lonely ghost. Du Hong Thien Nu, my grotto heaven still lacks a guardian spirit general. And this imperial mausoleum will also need a caretaker in the future. Nguyen Ho asked Fangshang Shi if he was willing, and Fangshang Shi readily agreed. But when Fangshang Shi saw the celestial defect spirit mirror, he seemed to remember something. In ancient times, My Fangshang Shi people also followed the Mountain Sea Nation. Now, all have turned to dust and smoke. If one day, we could return to those mountain sea ruins, that would be our final resting place. Fangshang Shi was invited and entered the mirror. No longer a lonely wandering ghost, but a spirit general of a domain. Before parting, Nguyen Ho suddenly remembered something and asked Fangshang Shi, "Nguyen Ho, may I borrow your head for a moment? If successful, it could eliminate the mastermind behind this." Fangshang Shi, "Your Majesty, please feel free. Ever since it was taken by another, it has no longer been my head." After Nguyen Ho woke up, lifting his head from the table, he saw an outer robe draped over him. Nguyen Ho gently removed it and placed it aside. Attendants. Nguyen Ho descended and had Chu Ji County bring those flying skulls. Among them, he saw Fangshang Shi's head. Only, at this moment, Fangshang Shi's head was wailing incessantly, making it loathsome. Nguyen Ho ordered people to tie the head securely. Then, he tried to guide a corporeal soul into it, but it was unsuccessful from beginning to end. Why isn't it working? Nguyen Ho pondered, then immediately thought of the principle of 3 ethereal souls and 7 corporeal spirits. So Nguyen Ho immediately drew his sword and selected 2 more heads from the net. As if picking 2 melons from a field, he killed 2 more in succession. This time, the other heads were terrified, and not one dared to make a sound. Unfortunately, what emerged were 2 corporeal souls, not the ethereal soul Nguyen Ho had hoped for. Nguyen Ho, as if chopping melons and vegetables, killed a large batch. Finally, he only managed to obtain 1 ethereal soul of a fallen head. Looking at the pile of skulls that had previously fallen into the net, only one was still moving, Fangshang Shi's head. From this, it was evident that ethereal souls were indeed much harder to obtain than corporeal souls. Quote, "In the future, if I want to use this to deal with the one controlling these flying skulls, I'll need some potent methods." Nguyen Ho mused, took out the first ethereal soul of a fallen head he had obtained but not yet used, and then transferred the soul summoning art from himself to it. Previously, for Nguyen Ho to perform this soul summoning art, he had to be nearby for others to hear. If it were a critical moment, this thing that could fly in the sky would undoubtedly be much more useful than using it himself. Nguyen Ho gathered 3 ethereal souls, selected some unused corporeal souls to integrate, and finally merged them all into the head of that fallen head folk. This time was different from before. A change occurred immediately. Clack, clack, clack. The ferocious head immediately trembled violently, its teeth chattering. The mass of light inside the head constantly changed, seemingly wanting to condense into a unified entity. But it was always just a little short. Nguyen Ho drew his sword, observed carefully, and thought he had failed again. What's happening? Unexpectedly, a mass of light was expelled from the head, while the rest condensed into a unified entity. The expelled part was a redundant corporeal soul of a fallen head. Nguyen Ho sensed it for a moment. This thing seemed to already possess an ethereal soul within its body. Could it be the divine ability of the Fangshang Shi lineage? The remainder, the ethereal soul and corporeal soul, fused into an inseparable whole, then firmly attached to the skull. This physical form capable of existing in reality. Moreover, when the 3 ethereal souls and 7 corporeal souls merged into one, Nguyen Ho immediately had a feeling in his heart, and even a term appeared in his mind: corporeal ghost. This corporeal ghost was formed from ethereal and corporeal souls governed by Nguyen Ho's skill. So naturally, it couldn't resist Nguyen Ho. It could only serve the enemy. Nguyen Ho ordered it to be untied. This flying head immediately soared up, circling around Nguyen Ho. Nguyen Ho issued a command, speaking to the flying head. "Go, find the one who controlled you before, and bring me the head I want." Nguyen Ho watched as the corporeal ghost flying head, refined from ethereal and corporeal souls, flew out. It flew straight, seemingly about to crash into the roof beams. Then it suddenly made a turn, and soared into the dark night sky. In the darkness, a head floated, flying through large mountains, skimming over treetops. It could sense someone in the distance performing a spell, urging it to return quickly. The head swayed and then responded in a gruff voice. "Don't rush. Don't rush. I'm coming right now." Seeing dawn approach, the head immediately hid underground. As soon as it grew dark again, it flew out. Finally, it reached a place. The head, with its ferocious eyes wide open, landed outside a settlement, staring intently inside. The settlement was densely populated. In addition, in the surrounding mountain ranges, there were many barbarian tribes of the same ethnicity. This was clearly the dwelling place of an foreign tribe. Kak Ban Dang Nghe Trian Demon Emperor Thai Great Dragon Audio Channel Chapter Tam above the exorcism altar. A portly old shaman from the Vong Tu tribe was performing a ritual. He held a paper effigy, murmuring, but before he could finish chanting, the paper effigy in his hand was suddenly swept away by a gust of wind. The shaman's eyes widened as he reached out to grab it, but he missed, only able to watch the object fly further away. On the exorcism altar, the statue of Lord Ma Wang began to move and spoke. "Well, did you manage to catch that young brat Nguyen Ho?" The shaman's expression was grim, but he still tried to put up a brave front. "I don't know which deity interfered with my spell." Lord Ma Wang chuckled, mocking the shaman. Quote, "It must be the divine master Miao Shang from the western regions of Kunlun." But before he could finish speaking, the opponent had not only broken the suppression sorcery he had cast but also dispelled the flying head people illusion technique he had just perfected using the late emperor's skull. This time, the shaman's face changed drastically, and he cursed loudly. "A mere minor deity from beyond the borders dares to come to our central plains to show off its divine powers. I must." Using the suppression sorcery against that son of heaven, Nguyen Ho, was merely an attempt. To think of killing a son of heaven with such a simple technique was rather unrealistic. In fact, this was merely his own presumptuous act. It was the showboating of a mortal who believed his sorcery had reached divine levels. However, having the late emperor manifest to expose the demonic identity of the son of heaven Nguyen Ho was of utmost importance. That was a responsibility entrusted to him by another, and absolutely no mistakes were allowed. At this very moment, because the shaman had flaunted his sorcery, he had, in turn, caused a lapse in the most critical initial step. How could he not be anxious? The shaman immediately thought of a way to remedy the situation. But before he could find a solution, bad news arrived continuously. The flying head people of the Vong Tu tribe, a legacy from ancient times, had been nearly half decimated by Nguyen Ho's men. The shaman was anxious, angry, regretful, and hateful, these four emotions intertwined, compounded by the backlash. In an instant, he spat out fresh blood and collapsed onto the altar. At this time, he still struggled to get up, leaning on the table, and said to the acolyte guardian below the exorcism altar, quote, Quickly go inform the general that something has gone wrong." After regaining some strength, the shaman immediately leaned against the exorcism altar, preparing to cast a spell again to control the remaining flying head people and make them fly back. This type of flying head person was a being evolved from ancient bloodlines. Their name indicated they were people from the Vu nation during the primeval age of ancient mountains and seas. Each one was difficult to come by. Now, having lost nearly half of the flying head people, the shaman's heart ached as if cut. He was determined to bring back every single remaining one. However, when he turned his head, the paper statue of Lord Ma Wang, which had been trapped by a pre-arranged snare, suddenly burst into flames at this very moment. Damn it, the three-eyed, horse-faced deity, seeing the unfavorable situation, had already fled. This deity might be related to another grand plan, relying on him. It was possible to control the donkey troops that once rampaged during the prosperous Great Shang dynasty. He absolutely could not be allowed to escape. The shaman looked behind him, and at the same time, waves of hoofbeats reached his ears. Extremely urgent. Clip-clop, clip-clop. At first, only the sound could be heard, but no figure was seen. As the sound receded into the distance, in the darkness, a ghost horse galloped hastily. And Lord Ma Wang's voice was also heard. Stop chasing. It seems that with just you lot, you can't deal with that Nguyen family brat now. How about you and I join forces to stir up trouble in this western city region? And then we each rely on our own abilities. What do you say? Everything happened in an instant. A slight error led to a huge deviation, leaving people no time to react. This time, the shaman could no longer hold back. He spat out another mouthful of fresh blood and fell to the ground. Unconscious, the acolyte below the exorcism altar immediately rushed up, shaking and massaging him, finally managing to revive him. Only then did the shaman remember that he wanted to cast a spell to control those flying head people and bring them back. So, he immediately stood up and ascended the altar once more. But in the end, by near dawn, he had only managed to summon back 4 flying head people. The whereabouts of the others were unknown. The shaman placed these flying head people into a ceramic jar on the exorcism altar. Sighing, not knowing how to report this matter to his superiors, anxious in his heart, another surge of hot chi rushed to his head. His body, which had been struggling to hold on, finally succumbed to illness and collapsed on the ground. But soon, he wouldn't need to report anything. On the night of the second day, a skull fell from the sky, circling round and round the bamboo and wooden stilt house, which had a strong tribal man-people's charm. It finally stopped outside his window. Calling his name, the shaman's eyes flew open, only to find he couldn't move. He had been hit by a soul-summoning technique, but he recognized that the head outside the window was the one that previously belonged to him. Refined into a flying head person using ancient Vu sorcery. At this moment, the skull outside the window spoke in a loud voice. Lend me your head for a moment. Under the shaman's terrified gaze, the head-severing Tran Gui swooped down and bit the severely ill and weakened shaman to death. Until the moment of his death, the shaman's eyes were filled with disbelief. It was clearly a flying head person he controlled. Yet now this flying head person had returned to kill him. How could this be possible? And as soon as the shaman died, the jars on the exorcism altar outside also began to shake violently one after another, and then, one by one, the flying head people broke out of the jars. Flee quickly, the old shaman is dead. Good riddance. From now on, no one can bind us anymore. Those flying head people had lost their master, and there was no one left to control them. They immediately scattered in all directions. And the head-severing Tran Gui immediately targeted one of them, pursuing it relentlessly. Nguyen Ho was still at the Lotus Temple. Such a major disturbance at the imperial mausoleum sacrifice should have some resolution. From the pavilion on the mountain of the Lotus Temple, one could see monks practicing martial arts at the foot of the mountain. Zhou Jiaku was in front of the pavilion, reporting on recent findings. I have investigated. The custom of wearing gold rings around the neck should belong to the Vongtu tribe in Vu Prefecture. They originally resided in the southern land of Chu and have only recently moved to Vu Prefecture. Normally, these Vu tribes are nominally under the jurisdiction of the Five Streams Inspection Bureau. During wartime, the Western Barbarian Volunteer Militia Prefecture will summon these man soldiers for expeditions. Nguyen Ho understood something. Is Pei Yuanshao behind this? Zhou Jiaku. I dare not speculate recklessly. I do not know if the pillar of the state grand general is involved in this matter. But this Vongtu tribe is indeed connected to him. Many of the soldiers under his command belong to this tribe. Although Pei Yuanshao had repeatedly evaded and hesitated, unwilling to directly confront and break with Nguyen Ho, he ultimately would not sit idly by and watch Nguyen Ho grow stronger step by step. He's about to make his move. Nguyen Ho had smelled trouble. The entire western city region was very likely about to descend into chaos. Nguyen Ho dismissed Zhou Jiaku and then sent for 2 other people to have an audience. Have the people from the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Revenue come to see me. The Five Streams Inspection Bureau was an agency for managing the man people, belonging to the Ministry of Revenue. This bureau was not newly established but was set up during the prosperous era of the Great Shang dynasty. Later, when the late emperor fled to the western city, he took it over and retained it. Normally, Its primary duty was to supervise these man tribes and purchase cinnabar, rhinoceros horns, animal skins, and medicinal herbs from the man people. As soon as the ministers of war and revenue arrived, Nguyen Ho asked, "This Vong Tu tribe has relocated from elsewhere. How is their relationship with the other surrounding tribes and chieftains?" The minister of revenue replied, "There have been multiple disputes." Nguyen Ho asked again, "Haven't the other man chieftains and tribes thought of driving them away? For an outsider tribe, it's not so easy to live peacefully in a new place, let alone the unfamiliar climate and the difficulties of land reclamation. Did the place you arrived at not originally have an owner? Could the other surrounding forces be willing to let you occupy the benefits that originally belonged to them?" The minister of war, "These barbarian tribes cannot unite, and they are wary of the pillar of the state Grand General Pei Yuanshao. So they can do nothing about them." Nguyen Ho thought it through and immediately stood up. Taking a few steps, "I have found out that the evil spirits who desecrated the late emperor's mausoleum were brought by the ghost shaman of that Vong Tu tribe." Then, he issued an edict. "Issue the decree. Ask Pei Yuanshao. In the past when he faced misfortune, at the moment of life and death, it was the late emperor who sheltered him. Now, the Vong Tu tribe has caused trouble and disturbed the late emperor's imperial mausoleum. The ghost shaman of that tribe used suppression sorcery to try to harm the Son of Heaven. How should I deal with them?" Below the platform, an official wrote swiftly, quote, "To you, Minister Pei, in your past times of hardship, it was the late emperor who bestowed upon you armor and accepted you as his subject. Now, the vile Vong Tu Liao have desecrated the late emperor's mausoleum, and the ghost shaman of that tribe used dark sorcery in an attempt to assassinate me in the palace. How should such treacherous and insidious people be dealt with?" While Nguyen Ho issued an edict asking Pei Yuanshao's opinion on how to deal with the Vong Tu Vu tribe. On the other hand, he directly issued an edict to deal with them. "Issue a decree to the officials of the Five Streams Inspection Bureau. And also prepare to establish the Western Barbarian Volunteer Militia Prefecture, to urge the man volunteer militia teams to crusade against the Vong Tu Liao tribe." After Nguyen Ho issued his decree, he did not stay at the Lotus Temple any longer. Quote, "Let's go. Return. First, he would deal with this Vong Tu tribe and see what move Pei Yuanshao would make. However, before that, Nguyen Ho wanted to see something else. The old donkey. Chapter Chin. It was a summer day, and the rain poured relentlessly. Nguyen Ho had drifted off to sleep in the carriage. In his dream, he vaguely witnessed a bizarre scene. He himself was soaring through a sunless, gloomy forest, the wind howling incessantly, his hair disheveled and fluttering wildly. He recognized this as the perspective of the Phi Do Tran demon. At this moment, the Phi Do Tran demon was pursuing another skull, which was terrified beyond measure. No matter if it fled to the ends of the earth, the Phi Do Tran demon was determined to capture it. Even though that other Tran demon was at the distant horizon, Nguyen Ho could still sense it. However, this connection was unstable. Naturally, it could also be that Nguyen Ho was not yet proficient in using it. Quote, "Using this Phi Do Tran demon for mere killing is truly a waste of great talent. This creature should be used for surveillance and reconnaissance. If it were wartime, I fear it could unleash unimaginable, miraculous effects. This wasn't a blade to kill one person, but a divine weapon capable of slaying 10,000. However, it depended on whose hands it fell into." Thinking this, Nguyen Ho even felt a tinge of regret for killing that bracelet sorcerer, not knowing if the methods for refining and controlling these head-dropping people had been passed down. After capturing the skull of that former emperor, this Phi Do Tran demon would be of great use to him. Not like now, being used for theatrics or as an assassin. Nguyen Ho rested for a while. The rain outside seemed to have stopped, and a eunuch approached to report. Quote, "Your Majesty, the rain has stopped." Nguyen Ho opened his eyes, his voice emanating from within. "Then let's continue." Knights bearing command flags rode along the road, relaying the imperial decree to every corner. The procession, stretching to the horizon, began to move forward again, finally arriving at Tam County. The most important place in the western Cheng region was Cam Quan Prefecture. Tay Kin City was within Cam Quan Prefecture, and Tam County was to its west. As the emperor's grand entourage passed through this place, Nguyen Ho lifted the curtain, and vast fields greeted his eyes. Vast river waters flowed down from Dujiangyan, traversing the expansive land, with canals branching out in all directions to irrigate the mulberry fields. Besides rice paddies, there were also many mulberry fields, connected to the farmers' houses. Even without knowing much about the populace's sericulture, Nguyen Ho could discern the prosperity of this place. Quote, "It is a good place. According to the divine fragrance celestial maiden, when the ancient Cheng kingdom still existed, this place had numerous temples for worshipping and offering sacrifices to the white maiden goddess. To this day, some of these temples still remained. Nguyen Ho had come here precisely to utilize this place, using the white maiden goddess's power to summon those old donkeys down from the mountains and simultaneously recreate the donkey army of old." After arriving at Tam County, officials of all ranks from outside Tam County town, along with many people from within the town, came out to welcome him. Many people along the road even held incense burners, and some had even set up altars. At a glance, Nguyen Ho thought they were welcoming a deity. "Greetings, Your Majesty. Long live, long live, long live Your Majesty." However, Nguyen Ho did not enter Tam County town but stopped at a guest house outside the town. But before he could even spend the night, Nguyen Ho left the guest house again and went to the temple of the White Maiden Goddess. The official word was that he had heard the White Maiden Goddess here was extremely efficacious. So he came to offer sacrifices. This statement was not wrong. Whether that White Maiden Goddess was efficacious or not, no one understood better than Nguyen Ho. A single call and she would appear before him. Indeed, very efficacious. Nguyen Ho did not ride in a carriage but came on horseback. With people clearing the path ahead, it was the magistrate of Tam County, and armored soldiers accompanying him on both sides. "Your Majesty, we have arrived." Nguyen Ho approached the temple to inspect it, only to see a plaque hanging above, "Temple of the Cheng King." He immediately recognized that this was no ordinary temple. Enshrined within was the former king of the ancient Cheng kingdom. The specific time when the ancient Cheng kingdom existed was no longer recorded. The so-called former king had long since become a mythological legend. However, Nguyen Ho did not understand why he, wanting to offer sacrifices to the White Maiden Goddess, had been led to this place. The magistrate of Tam County stood below the horse, bowing. "Your Majesty may not know. That White Maiden Goddess was a deity worshipped by the ancient Cheng kingdom. Now, who knows how long that ancient Cheng kingdom has been extinct? When the descendants of the ancient Cheng kingdom offer sacrifices, they mainly sacrifice to the ancient Cheng king, not that White Maiden Goddess. But to this day, the temple still retains the spirit tablet of the White Maiden Goddess." The magistrate of Tam County did not know how efficacious this White Maiden Goddess was. If the emperor hadn't mentioned her, he wouldn't even have known which deity this White Maiden Goddess was. But since the emperor said she was efficacious, then she must undoubtedly be efficacious. Nguyen Ho gently tugged the reins. "Looking at the temple, a deity worshipped by the ancient Cheng kingdom? Speak in detail." Since the emperor wished to hear, this magistrate of Tam County naturally hoped to impress the emperor further. That ancient myth and legend's origin is untraceable to this day. But there are two accounts regarding the origin of this White Maiden Goddess. One is that this White Maiden Goddess was said to be transformed from an imperial princess of the Han era. It is said she rode a donkey into the western Cheng region, but unfortunately fell ill and died in a foreign land. After her death, that white donkey guarded her body and died from starvation. The other account claims that this White Maiden Goddess was a goddess from ancient times, who rode a white dragon from the western mountains. That white dragon later transformed into white silkworms, and the goddess bestowed these white silkworms upon mortals, teaching the people of the western Cheng region the art of sericulture and silk weaving, from which the ancient western Cheng kingdom arose. Nguyen Ho could not distinguish the truth of these two legends. But he remembered that when the white maiden goddess appeared, her attire was in the Han style. And the white maiden goddess indeed possessed the divine ability to control donkeys. It seemed the former legend was perhaps a bit more credible. Nguyen Ho dismounted. He immediately ordered preparations to enter the temple and offer sacrifices to the white maiden goddess. Everything was prepared, and Nguyen Ho lit a bundle of incense, the fragrant smoke curling upwards. Ordinarily, upon encountering any temple of a deity, let alone kowtowing or offering incense, if Nguyen Ho didn't order people to destroy your temple, smash your idol, and leave your ghostly soul to wander in the wilderness, to be exposed and dissipated under the sun, it was already his benevolence. Even at the Lotus Temple, he merely glanced at it before turning away. He, this mortal emperor, had come to understand that no matter which deity or saint resided in this mortal world, none were as formidable as him. But at this moment, he thought again. This was a herd of old donkeys. He stuck the incense into the burner, murmuring a prayer, "Accept my incense, and you must repay me the karmic debt." This stick of incense from Nguyen Ho immediately connected to the spiritual realm. Layers of incense smoke dissipated high above. It was as if Nguyen Ho's consciousness opened a path to the heavens. Misty clouds swirled. Layers of celestial pavilions and palaces stood close together, cascading down from above like stairs. Along the corridors, celestial maidens in silk robes fluttered, and below the palace gates, golden-armored divine generals glared into the distance. There were also flying asparas and rakshasas, and divine soldiers on patrol. Since the divine fragrance celestial maiden had been ennobled by Nguyen Ho, the atmosphere in this spiritual realm had become increasingly majestic. As soon as Nguyen Ho entered, divine spirits arranged a chariot formation to welcome him. He rode the chariot from high above, directly to the front of the palace. Unexpectedly, he happened to witness such a scene. Below a high platform, a headless divine spirit, clad in golden armor and a bearskin cloak, with 4 eyes on its torso, held a saber. The white maiden goddess, meanwhile, was bound with iron chains and placed below the platform. At this moment, the white maiden goddess trembled uncontrollably, not only fearing the enraged divine fragrance celestial maiden on the highest platform but also terrified by the power emanating from the headless divine spirit beside her. This Fang Shangxi, since ancient times, had possessed the divine ability to exorcise demons and slay gods. Nguyen Ho descended from the sky, glanced at the white maiden goddess, then walked towards the divine fragrance celestial maiden. The divine fragrance celestial maiden stepped forward. "Your Majesty." Nguyen Ho stepped down from the divine chariot. "I have arrived." He did not ask what the divine fragrance celestial maiden was doing, as he knew she would tell him. The divine fragrance celestial maiden, this lowly slave, dared to conceal information. That horse-faced god, although lacking the divine ability to refine a donkey army, does possess a method to lure out the old donkeys hiding in the mountains. Seeing that this lowly slave still refuses to repent, I must let her taste my methods, refine her soul and consciousness, and make her completely subservient, make her not dare to have a single thought of defiance, and obediently submit to your Majesty. The divine fragrance celestial maiden seemed genuinely enraged, intending to use methods Nguyen Ho had never witnessed. In her mouth, the deity before her was not like a deity, more like a horse, a slave girl, livestock. The white maiden goddess cried miserably. This servant never concealed anything. It's just that no one ever asked this servant. Nguyen Ho understood the situation, thought for a moment, then said, quote, "If that horse-faced god also has a way to lure out the old donkeys, then let this matter rest for now." You have just finished listening to episode 9 of the audiobook, Demon Emperor, at Great Dragon Audio Channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to get the latest updates. Thank you so much.